Hi, and welcome to part 2 of the webinar series on the multilingual academic corpus of assignments, Writing and Speech Macaws, by Bruno Sommer, Alexei Novikov, Adriana Picaral, and Dr. Shelley Staples. This webinar is the second in our series and will focus on the framework that guided the creation of our materials. The previous webinar was an introduction to our series, and the one following this one is on the pedagogical materials on genre and register awareness in Portuguese. In this webinar, we'll focus on these three aspects: why using language produced by learners, what is data-driven learning, or DDL, and we'll also showcase the types of activities that we developed. To recap, the last webinar ended with the discussion of instructors' involvement. As you might remember, the instructors are involved in the process in three different ways. One way that we'll specifically discuss in this webinar is the creation of DDL, or data-driven learning pedagogical materials. First, I'll explain what DDL is, and then I'll talk about the organizing principles that guided the creation of the materials. So why use learner data, or the language produced by learners? So first of all, learner data is authentic, with real patterns produced by the students in pedagogically occurring settings, which is relevant for other students and also appropriate for their levels compared to naturally occurring language produced by native speakers. One last but important point is that non-native speaker varieties should be viewed as legitimate despite their developmental nature. So DDL is an approach that uses a word, or sometimes a combination of words, that appear in different color in the middle to showcase the use of this word or words in context with other words. These words usually appear in concordance lines, which are created from multiple sentences and texts. And from the teacher's perspective, DDL is useful for creating pedagogical materials, while from the learner's perspective, DDL is beneficial in terms of inductive learning by discovering linguistic patterns. We here will focus on the teacher's perspective. So instead of a typical text that you would normally give to students, DDL output looks like a sequence of concordance lines. Here's an example of a concordance line. So over here. So each line in this text is basically a concordance line. A concordance line is not your typical sentence, and there is a reason for that. DDL uses the concept of frequency of occurrence of linguistic features. For example, the preposition the, which occurs in the middle here, is also called a keyword in context, occurs frequently in multiple texts and sentences and was chosen as a focal feature of this particular activity. Besides frequency, DDL and corpus linguistics in general emphasize the concept of co-occurrence of words. That is, how often two words occur together. John Firth once famously said, "You will know a word by the company it keeps." Here, the preposition the, for example, frequently co-occurs with the verb to go, haju, or more specifically, I go. So again, this was an example of concordance lines used to create DDL activities, which I will come back to later in this video. So now we'll talk about the organizing principles that guided the creation of our materials. Lorna corpora can be used for error analysis, which can be an organizing principle in itself. But instead, here we based our materials on what learners can do, resulting in these three broad categories: genre and register awareness, lexicogrammar, and culture. So here's an example of a DDL activity prompt that focuses on lexicogrammar. So here, we're dealing with the verb есть in Russian, which can be used to mean to eat or express possession, depending on the context of use. And here are the concordance lines that go with the prompt that you saw a couple of slides earlier. The verb есть is in the middle here in blue, and the students need to decide which use of the verb есть it is. Remember, it could be the verb to eat or the verb that expresses possession, or the verb to have, depending on the context of use. So from the examples, you can see here the menu has Korean barbecue. So obviously that's the verb to have, express in possession. Or here you have likes to eat miso soup and sushi. So the verb to eat here. So this is the end of this webinar, and the next webinar will present activities based on genre and register awareness in Portuguese.